South Carolina is the latest state to place tough new restrictions on abortions. It is part of a renewed focus on abortion access with a new conservative majority on the Supreme Court. John Yang has the story.
Judy, the bill that South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster signed today bans abortions after 8 weeks of pregnancy if a fetal heartbeat is detected. The only exceptions are rape, incest, and to protect the health of the mother. Nearly a dozen other states have passed similar laws, but all have been blocked by the courts, and Planned Parenthood has already sued to block this one. But at the signing ceremony, McMaster predicted that anti-abortion forces would prevail.
If there is not a right to life, then what life is there? What rights exist, if not the elementary, fundamental, profound right to life? So we are here to protect that. And this step we take today was long in coming and monumental in consequence. But our battles are not over. Yet I believe that the dawn of victory is upon us.
The state legislatures across the country have increasingly become the front lines of the struggle in the debate over abortion. Gavin Jackson is a public affairs reporter for South Carolina ETV, which is a network of PBS stations in South Carolina. And Mary Ziegler is a Florida State University law professor. She's the author of Abortion and the Law in America, Roe v. Wade to the Present. Thank you both for joining us. Gavin, let me start with you. It sounds like it was a wild and woolly session yesterday when the House finally passed this bill. What was it like? Give us a sense of what it was like in the chamber.
Well, it was definitely a unique day in the chamber, but I first want to start how we got here, John, and that's been, we're 6 weeks now into our legislative session. This bill has been zooming through the General Assembly. It was the first bill introduced in the Senate, first bill filed in the Senate, and then had multiple hearings, got right through the committee process, got on the Senate floor, and headed right over to the House, where they also had the same kind of committee process, got through that really quickly. And the whole key here, too, in the House was not to amend this bill. Lawmakers wanted to get this to the governor's desk as soon as possible. So we did see some contentiousness on the floor yesterday among some Republicans, actually one Republican lawmaker, a fringe Republican lawmaker, who got a little upset because he wasn't able to file any amendments to this bill that would take out the exceptions for rape and incest, because a lot of Republican lawmakers want to go a little bit further with this bill, but of course they wouldn't have had the support to do that. So this was kind of the compromise, and you heard from the governor there in that clip saying, hey, this is the first step. We can keep going forward. Of course, this step is still kind of pending, depending on what's going on in the courts at this point. As you said, there's already a court challenge in place. So while abortions are halted right now temporarily in the state, the injunction could be granted as soon as tomorrow afternoon.
This is not the first time that South Carolina lawmakers have tried to pass this bill. What was the difference this time? And do the lawmakers see themselves as part of a national push, a national drive against abortion?
Yeah, John, this was, it's no big secret about lawmakers here in South Carolina wanting to get this to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, we're behind a few states with laws already going to the Supreme Court for challenge. I think we're the first one in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals to try and get one to the Supreme Court. But again, several other states, including Georgia, passing a similar bill like this, to go to the Supreme Court. But right now, it was really trying to make good on some campaign promises. We did see Republicans pick up seats in the Senate and the House. Last November, we saw lawmakers really wanting to make a big splash. We have the governor up for re-election next year. All this comes into a good storm of them uniting essentially behind a major legislative victory, which is the abortion ban. And that's something that, we might be seeing a lot of things going on at the national level with the future of the Republican Party. In South Carolina, the Republican Party is united behind what just took place today in South Carolina.
Mary Ziegler, let's talk a little bit about that national picture. How place this South Carolina law in context for us in terms of restrictiveness in the other state laws that are being passed or being pushed right now?
Well, I think South Carolina lawmakers were trying to push this as being a kind of new generation of heartbeat bill, a more kind of moderate bill, if you will. It's an example of what we think of as extreme changing in some states, right? I mean, heartbeat bills of any kind would have been seen as pretty out there, and we're seeing that way in 2019. And now versions of a heartbeat bill, albeit with some of the exceptions you outlined, John, are now being framed by lawmakers as normal. And that's partly because the entire spectrum of abortion legislation has changed pretty radically. So we've seen a bill proposed in Arizona that would sentence, for example, women as well as doctors involved in abortions to make them face murder charges and potentially even subject them to the death penalty, given that first-degree murder is death eligible in Arizona. So this, I would still qualify heartbeat bills as more sort of absolute in the grand scheme of things, but the more lawmakers embrace this strategy, the more what we would view as absolute or extreme laws changes. And so that's something that I think South Carolina lawmakers have very consciously done to say this is a sort of new generation heartbeat bill that isn't as extreme, but it speaks more to the fact that what we think of as extreme in this debate is changing.
Is what we think of extreme in this debate changing because because the court has changed? We now have 3 justices nominated by Donald Trump who have all had things to say about abortion.
I think that's certainly what lawmakers are responding to. There was a sense in which it was almost futile introducing a bill like this, even probably after Brett Kavanaugh joined the court, simply because that was asking the court not only to overrule Roe, but to do so pretty expeditiously and in a fairly flashy way. And I think now state lawmakers are betting that among President Trump's 3 Supreme Court nominees, there are at least enough to get to that magical 5 votes that would result in the overturning of Roe. I think it goes beyond that, though, because I think the anti-abortion movement, much like the Republican Party, is divided. There's a sort of anti-abortion establishment, much like there's a GOP establishment, and there's an insurgent wing of the anti-abortion movement. A lot of those folks have been behind the heartbeat bills and some of the more extreme legislation we're seeing. And just as that wing of the GOP is ascendant, I think that wing of the anti-abortion movement is making a bid for control too. And that wing of the movement has connections in places like South Carolina, and we're seeing the consequences of that play out now.
There is a restrictive abortion law from Mississippi that would ban abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. That has been a request for the Supreme Court to hear it, has been pending since October. I think there were a lot of observers who thought that that this new court would take it fairly quickly. What is it possible to say what this delay means with the fact that they have not taken it yet?
It's hard to say. So ordinarily, if the court had started meeting about the case in October and still hadn't made a decision, we would conclude that the court was likely not going to take the case and that there was some justice angry about that fact. So, you could imagine Clarence Thomas, for example, writing an angry opinion dissenting from the court's decision not to take the case. What makes this harder to read is that part of the delay stemmed from the fact that the court just kept rescheduling this and not meeting about it at all. And we don't really know why that was. There are different theories. It could be all of the kind of election challenges President Trump was generating. It could be COVID. It could be that the court just isn't sure where to go on abortion, right? I mean, we have the great mystery in this is what kinds of conservative do we have on the Supreme Court? We have a one wing in Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito who seem quite willing to get rid of Roe quickly. We have Chief Justice John Roberts who seems to want to take a more cautious approach, and we quite simply don't know where the other 3 justices are going to land. And the court's kind of hesitation to go one way or another on this Mississippi case is kind of deepening the mystery.
Mary Ziegler from Florida State University, Gavin Jackson, South Carolina, ETV. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.